power costs. Ball State is saying counties that restrict utility scale renewables are leaving jobs and GDP on the table, mostly in manufacturing and transportation. At the same time, DC Blocks wants to drop a massive data center campus on the old Ford Visteon site in Indianapolis, adding another large load customer into an already stressed grid. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through what changed and the questions to put in front of your team so you're not guessing about how county policies and new data centers could change your cost and reliability picture. So, let me give you one number to keep in your head today. $204 million. That's the net GDP loss Ball State's Center for Economic Research says is tied to Indiana counties that restrict utility scale wind and solar projects, with an estimated loss of more than 8,700 jobs, mostly in manufacturing and transportation. If that finding holds, it means local policy about what can and cannot be built in your county does not stay on paper. It shows up as fewer jobs, weaker local supplies, and a softer tax base that funds roads, schools, and workforce pipelines, if the finding holds. The question for this week is simple. In the counties where you operate or hire from, do you know whether renewable restrictions are in place and how those decisions could change the economic strength of the communities you rely on for talent and suppliers? If you depend on Indiana's manufacturing and logistics ecosystem, Ball State's new study on renewable restrictions could change how you think about county energy policy and long term costs. The study from Ball State's Center for Business and Economic Research, led by Dr. Michael Hicks, claims that the counties with restrictions on utility scale wind and solar have seen weaker economic performance, including an estimated $204 million in net GDP loss and more than 8,700 fewer jobs, mostly in manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing. On the surface, that reads like allow renewables, get more jobs, restrict them, lose growth. Here's the deal. In my view, this is not a complete evaluation. The study is useful, but it looks like a front end snapshot of jobs and revenue from renewable manufacturing and construction without fully tracking what happens after these projects are built. Utility scale renewable integration has a strong brand, but at the grid level, it often comes with very high capital costs, cost recovery riders, and follow on grid modernization projects. And every dollar the utility spends gets pushed back onto commercial, industrial, and residential customers. So, the jury is still out for me on whether this assessment includes the full second and third order cost waves that hit your bill years after the ribbon is cut. What I would watch now is how the Ball State brief gets used in county zoning fights and at the General Assembly. If this study becomes the only story people tell, you may get policy that chases near term construction jobs without a holistic view of long term cost recovery riders and grid upgrades. Here's a question for your team. In the counties where you operate or hire from, do you know both the current stance on utility scale renewables and how county leaders are weighing long term customer costs against short term project headlines? That is a good question. If you operate in Marion County or rely on Indianapolis infrastructure, a proposed $2 billion DC Blocks data center could change who your utility pays attention to and how future costs are spread out. DC Blocks has filed plans to build a 3 building data center campus on the former Ford Visteon manufacturing site at 305 Fintail Drive in Indianapolis, with about 35 permanent high wage jobs and hundreds of construction roles. They've committed to paying for all related costs tied to a new substation and additional generation, which on paper sounds very favorable for existing customers. The truth of the matter is, a data center project is neither automatically good nor automatically bad for you. The real equation is data center plus utility posture plus regulator behavior. Substation and generation costs are only part of the picture. Additional transmission and distribution upgrades and other infrastructure can still be pushed into commercial and industrial costs of service over time. The question is whether the utility and the regulator treat this as a new revenue opportunity, as something that should be largely self-funded by the project, or as a chance to quietly and secretly blend subsidy costs into your bill in future rate cases and in future riders. What I'd watch for now is the first public hearing on May 14th at the city county building, and then how AES and local regulators talk about transmission and distribution costs around this project. The full picture of transmission and distribution is not just the substation. Keep that in mind. Here's a question for your team. For your Indianapolis facilities, do you have a clear view of how AES has historically treated large load projects, and who on your side is responsible for tracking whether today's great deal for a data center becomes tomorrow's higher all in energy cost for your operation? Today, you're looking at two different but related pressures: a study saying renewable restrictions are linked to economic losses, and a proposed $2 billion large load customer in Indianapolis that will lean on the same grid you depend on. On one side, Ball State is arguing that shutting the door on utility scale wind and solar can weaken local GDP and job growth, especially in manufacturing and logistics. On the other side, decades of experience tell us that utility scale projects and large new loads can drive very large capital plans, cost recovery riders, and modernization efforts that show up on commercial and industrial bills over many years. Taken together, this means county zoning, utility planning, and data center deals are not abstract. They change your long term, all in cost per kilowatt hour and your exposure to constrained capacity when you need it the most. Now, obviously, I don't run your plant. You do that. My real job as CEO of Tactical Energy Group is to stay on top of everything that changes the cost and reliability of your power and the economics of making things in Indiana so we can build the right products and programs for the manufacturing community. While I'm doing that work anyway, this brief is my way of giving you as much of that insight as I possibly can so you can spend more time running your operation and less time trying to decode bills, rate cases, and headlines. Let me give you a few questions you can take straight into your morning huddle today. If you can't answer these, you do not have a clear view of how local energy policy and new large load projects could change your long-term power costs and reliability. Here are some questions for your morning huddle. First, how might our facilities energy strategy be impacted if our county or adjacent counties adopt or maintain restrictions on utility scale renewable energy projects? And who is responsible for tracking those policy moves for us? Second, in the utilities and counties where we operate, do we know whether leaders are using studies like the Ball State Brief as the full story, or are they weighing long term cost recovery and grid upgrade costs that end up on customer bills, on your bills? Third, given the increasing demand from large load users like data centers, what is our current understanding of our utilities capacity and our long term power supply reliability and cost projections for our Indianapolis or Marion County operations? Fourth, when a new large load project is proposed in our utility territory, who on our team is accountable for reading the filings, attending key hearings, and asking whether transmission and distribution costs are being shifted into our future rates? That's very important. Now, if this brief helped you see today's headlines with a little bit more clarity, through the lens of your operation, send it to one other Indiana manufacturer who should be ahead of these issues instead of reacting to them like so many do. If you want help decoding how these kinds of projects and policies could change your bill and your uptime, that is exactly the lens we bring to every conversation. I'm Daniel Burke. This is TEG Daily, and I will see you tomorrow.